Good morning, JP Abercrumbie. Good morning, everyone joining in right now. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Between Two Hedges. I am joined by the lovely, talented, inspirational JP Abercrumbie, our Assistant AD for Student Athlete Development, the Queen of Yaz. If you go, we'll talk about that later on. But welcome in, everyone coming in. If it's your first time, thank you. We look to make this participatory, so we want people to join in, participate in the conversation. So there's a Q&A function in your on your screen. Please send in those questions. We allot some time at the end to touch on those, but if something comes up in the middle of the conversation, we'll also jump in and answer that as we go. So welcome, JP. Thank you for taking the time this Thursday.
Hey, Mike, happy to be here. You know, getting early this morning, getting an 11 o'clock call. Ready?
You know your day started way before this. You know you're on the phone. This is like, for us, this is towards the end of the day, right? Like it's been
it's my midday snack break, you know?
Midday snack break. So, hey, we'll jump right in, JP. So I think a lot are familiar with you, some may not be, but we'll start off about your student athlete experience, a former student athlete. In your role now, you touch all of our student athletes daily, but let's talk about you, your time back in collegiate days.
You want to start there, or do you want to start before that? You know, I think
you can start. Hey, start. You lead the way. You lead the way.
Well, I mean, you've touched on working with a lot of our student athletes, and I asked if you wanted to start earlier because I think my journey before college kind of lends itself to what I do. So for me, I was born in Southern California, right outside LA, so a little Southern California baby, but I grew up on the south side of Chicago. And, you know, from the West Coast to the Midwest, that was a transition, but I love Chicago, definitely south side raised. Chicago taught me a lot of things. I started my athletic career there, being a student athlete, a three-sport student athlete in high school. So the funny thing for me about how I got my start in athletics was just that I never planned on being an athlete. I was a musician first. I played piano and trumpet for most of my childhood, and then got into middle school, started playing basketball, loved it. Started going to high school thinking like, man, my high school team was known for running people off the floor, and I was not in middle school. So I did a running camp just before our high school career started, and that's when I fell in love with cross country and started my affair with track as well in that stint. But you know, got introduced to the sport of cross country there, went out for basketball, and was a three-sport athlete in high school. So cross country, basketball, track. The day cross country was over, I was at basketball practice. The day basketball practice was over, I was at track. And all throughout my high school career, I was just super involved. But I think when I think about my collegiate career, you know, I mentioned being from the West Coast, growing up in the Midwest, and then I had a lot of family in the South. So when it came time for me to decide where to go, I decided to go to the East Coast, needed to chart my own path, just figure things out, wanted to go somewhere where no one knew me. And that led me to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I got to become a temple owl. So just an owl of another variety. Those who know me know I love my owls. So double dip in there, but that was definitely a big plus in being able to come back to Rice and really just don that whole owl moniker all over again. So love that. And at Temple, I was a two-sport student athlete. So I dropped basketball for the most part, but really focused on cross country and track and field. I had some great opportunities throughout my high school career and leading into college to compete on the junior Olympic circuit and just fall in love with track. Love that. I was super involved as a student athlete and had a lot of opportunities in terms of leadership within the student athlete experience within the athletic department. Most notably was SAC, the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, and that really created my love for student athlete voice. I was also a linguistics major, so language, power, and identity, marrying that with the student athlete experience. Those were some things that kind of started off my career in college athletics. And I didn't know you could work in college athletics until I was a sophomore. Don't ask me what happened my freshman year. That's kind of a blur, moving from Chicago to Philadelphia. But when I realized that you could work in college athletics, I started to get more involved. SAC was probably the jump off point for me with that. And I loved my career at Temple. I had a lot of opportunities there and started to think about what I wanted to do with grad school. I mentioned SAC being pivotal to me deciding that I wanted to end up in this field, but it also gave me another look at what college athletics was really like beyond the athletic piece of it. And so that holistic development, understanding what student affairs, the higher ed side of the student experience was something that I really got to dig into while I was an undergrad student athlete. So when it came time for my senior year, I had a lot of great opportunities as I started to think about the transition out. You know, did I want to go straight into the workforce? Did I want to go to grad school? Ultimately, I decided that grad school was going to be the path for me. You know, I had some really great opportunities in terms of where I was going to do my graduate studies. And I also ended up getting a post-grad scholarship from the NCAA. A lot of people don't know that the NCAA has post-grad scholarships, but really thankful to get one of those and decided to continue my academic career at UC Berkeley, which is a lot of fun when you have some Stanford guys on staff. That rivalry still runs deep.
It still runs deep, still runs deep.
We definitely play on that a lot. But while I was at Cal, I studied, I pursued my master's in cultural studies of sport and education. Really fancy way of saying higher ed, student development, a little bit of law thrown in there, as well as some business concepts. But I think for me, the most pivotal experiences I had while I was at Berkeley really came in my assistant learning specialist role, but then also my marketing and fan experience role. So all of those opportunities really opened up some unique experiences and kind of led me down the path that I'm on today. While I was a grad student, I also had the opportunity to do some diversity and inclusion work, help with the strategic plan that Berkeley was creating at the time. And I spent a couple years out there before making the move to Stark Vegas, where I was at Mississippi State for a few years. And that's where I was before coming here. So happy to be here.
Welcome. So I'm going to, for those joining the call, JP Abercrombie, our assistant AD for student development, heads up our program. We're going to jump into that a little bit. I laughed at the beginning, JP, because I think those join. I have a prep call with everyone beforehand. We kind of talked through some things. There's one thing you touched on that you didn't touch on when we talked earlier, is your musical abilities. That's brand new to me. So do you still play? Do you still tickle the iron? Do you still play a little bit or what?
The woman of many talents, you know, there's more to me than my athletic identity. So yeah, it's funny. It actually came up in a conversation today I was having with one of our alumni, and you know, it comes out sometimes. Alicia Keys is one of my idols here.
I'm gonna hold you to this. You know, Michelle, you're gonna show up one day, there's gonna be a keyboard, just wait on a Sony keyboard on your desk. And I'm going to ask you to play.
You might get a little something. That's all I'm going to practice. A little something.
Very funny. I laughed. I was like, oh, new to me. All right, JP, who was your favorite athlete growing up? I've asked everyone that.
Yeah, you know, so I mentioned South Side of Chicago. I was there. I got to experience a lot of the Bulls' excitement. So people got to see the Last Dance play out over the last few months. You know, so watching that was a bit of nostalgia for me. Somebody might be expecting me to say Michael Jordan because of that, but I was actually a diehard Scottie Pippen fan. So, you know, got to relive some things during the Last Dance, but I grew up in a neighborhood full of boys. When we always played basketball, they always wanted to be MJ or Dennis Rodman. And I was like, I'm Scottie. So that was me as a little kid, just loving Scottie Pippen.
I love it. We're going to jump into your career, your kind of role here at Rice. And one thing you touched on too is in terms of before you pursued college athletics, linguistics, and that was something you studied, and how's that translated into kind of your career so far?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I told people I was going to be a speech pathologist. Like, you couldn't tell me anything else. When I was graduating, I was dead set on being a speech pathologist. And for those of you who don't know, communication sciences and disorders, it's something that I was really passionate about and still am in many ways. There were some experiences I had as a student athlete, and then also on the personal side, early on in my collegiate career, that caused me to want to change that. Some of it was, you know, just the academic schedule, the rigor, trying to balance that with my student athlete experience, especially with traveling. But other things were things that I experienced in my personal life that made me realize that as much as I love communication, as much as I love interacting with people, speech pathology wasn't the route for me. And that gave me the opportunity to open up some doors in the linguistics field. And while I was at Temple, I focused on more of the sociolinguistics path. So again, I've talked about language, but also power and identity. So language, power, and identity were some things that I studied early on. And I think in terms of what I get to do every day, our students, our staff, our coaches are always going to need to communicate with each other, or you're always going to need to communicate with a diverse group of people, especially when you're talking about achieving a common goal. And so that's where I get to come in, understanding how people work together, how they communicate with each other. But then also, as we talk about helping our students maximize their experience, it's about helping them find their voice, helping them amplify the things that they want to do and give them a platform that they can use from an informed place.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's touch a little bit on your role here at Rice. So you have your PR club shirt on. So for those, shout out to our men's track and field. Touch in on what's your role here at Rice and student athletes and also with our coaches?
Yeah, so you've touched on the student athlete development piece. That's what we're going to focus on. But within that role, I get to oversee our holistic development programs for all 16 of our sports. In addition to that, I get to serve as a member of the WHO, not the World Health Organization, but the Workplace Happiness Objective. I don't want to get the two confused, especially during these times. But that's an opportunity to work on some staff engagement, staff development, fellowship. It's a collection of people across the department. So that's one of the other roles I have. I mentioned a little bit of diversity and inclusion work earlier on, but then I also get to serve as a sport administrator for the men's track and field and cross country program. So as a former cross country and track and field athlete, that's something that I adore and enjoy very much. So I had to give them a little shout out today with the PR club, but it's definitely one of the opportunities that I enjoy.
John Warren's clapping from somewhere. John's pumping his fist. So those joining us right now, JP Abercrumbie, our assistant AD for student athlete development. For those who aren't in the circle of college athletics, JP's voice is heard throughout, right? JP's someone, and like many members of our staff that are really experts in their field, or really people who come to, are regarded highly nationally. JP's been a rock before the crisis, but I want to touch on these last 3-4 months where JP has been a resource, not just to our student athletes, but to our coaches, to our administration, to our leaders within. So we'll touch on, we'll say crisis, and we'll touch on two pieces, right? We'll touch on COVID, and then we'll get into the racial injustice and kind of how you've been a pillar for a lot of folks here. So let's go into, March. March happens, seasons are canceled. You're getting calls right off the bat. Talk a little bit about what your resource, kind of what you were providing support-wise to our kids and our coaches.
Yeah, it's kind of surreal to think about it. I was actually with our basketball programs at the tournament when the news broke and as things kind of unfolded. So, my immediate response was making sure that the people that I was with physically were okay. And once we kind of got things squared away, I headed straight back to campus that day and started to figure out where we were, really assess what the needs were, and kind of move out from that point forward. And I think as you saw, Conference USA announcements and maybe even the NCAA announcements, my first goal was to think about our students, think about our coaches, and how we can communicate with them and make sure that everybody's on the same page, and that ultimately that their needs at a basic level are being met. So what that looked like from my standpoint was really just checkpoints, right? Like understanding where our communication was and where it needed to be. Really trying to focus on getting all of our coaches on the same page, getting all of our student athletes to have the same message. And really in the weeks since that, it's been a team effort to say the least. I think about the units that I got to work with the most over this time. Our academic staff, our compliance staff, our sports medicine teams, we've kind of divvied up some responsibilities. We have 350 student athletes, and there's no way that I can be everything to everyone. But, how did we come up with a plan to do wellness checks, just on the personal development side, on the social side, making sure that all of our students had a safe place to go, but then also checking in with them as that state of instant athletic identity foreclosure happened. What could we do? Because they still had academics to kind of finish up for that spring semester. So the first couple weeks of COVID-19 and the shutdown are almost a blur, but if I take some time to reflect on it and think back, I think the immediate response was, what do our students need? What do our coaches need? How can we be effective in ensuring that they are positioned to finish out the semester as strong as possible? And then where can we go from there? So it's been a lot of, implement, assess, reassess, and communicate out. But I think ultimately everyone came together, and I'm really pleased with the response, and that's continued into the week since.
And then leads into, the murder of George Floyd. Even events leading up to that, you were really on the leading cusp of getting that conversation started, because there were things that led up to that murder that spurred what we're seeing today. But that happens, and our student athletes and our coaches, our staff, and you place to turn. We turn to you. So, talk a little bit about that experience and what you're still doing today on providing resource.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like my goal, especially in our senior leadership team, my role is to kind of have a pulse on what the student athlete experience is. And as we saw, as you mentioned, there were some things that led up to events that happened before George Floyd's killing that I felt like we needed to be aware of and that we needed to keep an eye on, especially as we were talking about our students that were maybe in other states. So we were having those conversations. We were thinking about it and trying to be mindful of the ways that we at least checked in on our students, checked in on our staff, just to see how people were doing, especially as COVID-19 was still out there. So there were a lot of different things kind of going on at once. And, then George Floyd. And I think there was an immediate pause, and there needed to be, especially given that he was from Houston. And there are some of our students who are from areas where he frequented, where his family is, or they know someone, through the grapevine, or there's someone who saw themselves in that situation. The identity of our student athletes, that it doesn't just stop there. They may identify, they saw themselves, their family members, their loved ones in the events that had happened in the last few weeks of May leading into June. So how could we support them? But then on a personal front, I identified with a lot of those events as a Black woman. And so how did I take care of myself so that I could be a resource for others? And I think part of that came back to the relationships that I had with our coaches and our staff. In that week, in the days immediately after George Floyd's killing, I had several coaches reach out saying, I want to have this conversation with my student athletes. I want to be able to talk to them. How can I do that effectively? What resources do we have? And, I'm thankful that I had relationships with our coaches before that incident, because that allowed them to see me as a trusted resource. And then I think back on my time at Mississippi State and at Cal, creating diversity councils, creating strategic plans, and that experience, all of those experiences really helped me be positioned to be a resource for our department here. But it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge that we do have resources on campus, like our Office of Multicultural Affairs, our Office of Diversity and Inclusion, who were helpful in those conversations that led up to the events of the end of May and early June. And they've been partners for us going forward. So like you mentioned, the conversations are really just starting. We acknowledge that we have a long road ahead of us, and we're really just trying to put together a plan that meets us where we are, assesses the needs of our situation, but helps us grow together as a department.
I want to thank you publicly also, because I know you were a resource for me. I think that's probably the greatest testament, the greatest compliment I can make to you, is that I think the student athletes relate to you, especially the Black student athletes who go to you as trustworthy, but also us, the administration, non-Black administration, faculty, staff, coaches, all trust you and get different perspectives on how to approach the conversation. So I appreciate everything you've done, and continue to kind of drive that forward. And like I said, the conversation's just started, but it's great to know that you're here on our campus leading it for us. So let's talk a little about what your baby, your bread and butter, right? I think we'll get into, for those on here, a lot of you are outcome supporters, you support athletics, and you probably received in the mail in June a piece that outlined your outcome support and what it meant for our SOAR program, Soaring to New Heights. And so it was a program that had gone dormant for 2 years in terms of student athlete development program, a position unfilled, and your support allowed us to go out and hire world-class talent and JP Abercrumbie to bring this thing back together. So JP, touch a little bit on what student athlete development means, all right, what the SOAR program is, and we'll go on to what we aspire for that program to be here in the near future.
Yeah, sure. So like we've talked about a little bit, student athlete development for me is that holistic development. So I really get to operate in the space in between academics and athletics. It's about supporting our students' transitions in, through, and then beyond rise successfully. And what that means is not only understanding what they have in terms of access by virtue of being RISE students, but making sure that all of those resources are truly accessible to them. It's my goal to not only be able to empower them to use those resources, but to ensure that they know how to, and that they're truly accessible for them, so that they can be equipped to handle all of the opportunities that are available to them for here, but also make sure that they can go wherever they want to go beyond their time at Rice. So really it's about meeting them where they are when they come in, making sure that they have these resources, that they're integrated into the student-athlete experience, and ensuring that our students are positioned to prosper and positioned to soar beyond graduation. So SOAR stands for Student-Athlete Opportunities for Advancement through Rice Values. And I'm sure all of our supporters know that Rice has very strong values as an institution. So being able to play on not only the responsibility, integrity, community, and excellence as values of the institution, but from an athletic standpoint, especially through Vision for Victory, being able to add things like grit and teamwork and curiosity, and really challenge our students to think critically about the positions they hold on their teams, within their programs, in our department, but also on the greater campus community, and then in life. So I get to really focus on the personal growth initiatives and professional preparation, professional development, and really make sure that they have experiential learning opportunities, mirroring their athletic experience, giving them a space to kind of trial, error, navigate, maybe even fail in some cases, but ultimately fail forward so that they can become the best versions of themselves. It's never a dull moment. I love it.
Never a dull moment. Never a dull moment. For those former student athletes on the call as well, you know, a resource from the SOAR program is the SOAR Network. And so, JP, we got a few student athletes on the call, former student athletes on the call. You touch on that, the SOAR Network, and what kind of resource that is for our alum and our current students.
Yeah, absolutely. So in taking stock of, you know, all of the opportunities that are available by virtue of being affiliated with Rice University, we learned that some of those were a little decentralized. And when it came to integrating them into the student experience, we needed to give them a centralized home, and that home is the SOAR Network. So the idea with the network is that as current students, we get them familiar with it. They have greater access and accessibility to all of those resources, all of those opportunities. And it's something that's available to them throughout the life cycle of their on-campus experience. But also, as you mentioned, for our alumni, for our letter winners, it's a place where you can come back and be connected to events, be connected to our current student athlete population. But also, there are several resources on campus that are alumni facing that went underutilized. And so we wanted to make sure that those could be put into that place and have a home there as well. So for our letter winners, it's an opportunity to receive access to those resources, to understand their touch points for engagement across the athletic department, whether it be coming back for a reunion or being able to be engaged with some of our personal and professional growth programming with our current student athletes, potentially serve as a mentor, internship host, be a part of our prospective employers network, or ultimately just connect with each other. We wanted to give our letter winners a space to be able to do that, and to do that in a space that's all their own. So that's what the SOAR Network is. It's a new platform that we've had for just over a year now, and we've seen a lot of great feedback come from it, but even just the enhancements to the student athlete experience in terms of all the programs that we've been able to enhance over the past year and a half have been a direct result of that effort and the alumni's engagement with that effort.
Fantastic. For those on the call who are not engaged on it, it's readily available off the riceowls.com website. We'll also follow up with everyone here on this call with an email that outlines the link to register and get you signed up if you haven't done so, or if you're in a position to do so. So I'm excited about that. JP, question in. We touched on COVID, and we touched on, you know, the racial and social injustices, but in terms of the biggest challenge student athletes face today, in a general scope, what do you think that is?
You know, I was asked this question maybe about 5 years ago by a sitting athletic director, and I don't know if this is a good thing or not, but my answer is still the same. And I think the biggest issue that faces collegiate student athletes, but also just college students in general, is self-awareness. And I think a lot of things that we see play out in social media, that play out in real life and interaction and engagement with people, stem from who you are as a person and how you can communicate that or articulate that to others. You know, again, I've talked about student athlete voice being something that's important to me or that I'm passionate about. And my goal is always to help our students find their voice, help them find what matters most to them. Being very values centric, or, you know, from my standpoint, you know about pack up, which is now pace, and you know about all the little JP isms that we have around the office. But my goal is always, how can I make sure that our students are active participants in the world around them? And from where I sit, that starts with their own understanding of themselves and what they want and where they see themselves being able to go, especially with that idea of prosperity. Who are they now, but who do they want to be? And how can we be, you know, very intentional about providing them experiences, opportunities, and resources to help them get there? So I think self-awareness is something that a lot of our students today really need to focus on.
Thank you, JP. So for those, I want to finish off with one thing, right? So if you're at any of our venues, if you go to a soccer game, if you're at track, if you jump into tutor, watch volleyball or basketball, you're probably hearing Yaz coming from somewhere in the crowd. That's JP. That's JP, and the Yaz transcends over to Twitter and social media. JP, where'd the Yaz come from?
You know, I don't know if it has a specific origin. If people can't tell, in addition to loving owls, I'm all school spirited out, right? That passion, that communication of that. You know, I got the blue lipstick. That's probably a JP staple too. I was wearing it when volleyball took down Texas. I was wearing black with football when they got their first win.
You wore the last 3 weeks too.
Yeah. Wait, once you find out what works, you can't change it. So. Yeah. I acknowledge that I have that role for our department. Different teams ask for different colors, but you know, different teams also have a different seat for me in their venue. I've been reminded by several of our student athletes that if I'm not in my seat by a specific time, they will let me know for sure. So, you know, that's my role. I'm the ultimate utility player right now. And it means that I can wear blue lipstick and give a couple, yeah.
There it is. Yeah.
Then that's what I am. So if anybody ever hears that or they see that on Twitter, I'll take the blame. Yep,
that's right. Take the claim. She'll claim it. She'll claim it. JP, thank you so much. I can't wait till we return to campus. And for those who come by Yunkin or come by the Bixby Academic Center, stop in JP's office, sign her wall, see some of the great quotes she has from our student athletes on her wall, which is always fun. But JP, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate you as a teammate, as a friend, and just happy you're here in Houston alongside of us. For everyone on the call, thank you for joining us. We'll do it again next Thursday. I've got JP, one of your favorites, JP. I got Tim Harrison joining me next Thursday. Tim Harrison, men's basketball alum, class of 20, one of the most dynamic guys you'll meet. So I'm excited to talk to him. Really excited about it. So JP, have a good one. Everyone else, stay safe. Have a great weekend. And as always, go Owls. Go Owls.